The Battle of Blue Licks, fought on August 19, 1782, was one of the last battles of the American Revolutionary War. The battle occurred 10 months after Lord Cornwallis's famous surrender at Yorktown, which had effectively ended the war in the East. On a hill next to the Licking River in what is now Robertson County, Kentucky, a force of about 50 American and Canadian Loyalists along with 300 American Indians ambushed and routed 182 Kentucky militiamen. It was the last victory for the Loyalists and natives during the Frontier War. Background: Caldwell's expedition. Although the main British army under Lord Cornwallis had surrendered at Yorktown in October 1781, virtually ending the war in the East, fighting on the western frontier continued. Aided by the British garrison at Fort Detroit, American Indians north of the Ohio River redoubled their efforts to drive the rebel American settlers out of western Virginia. In July 1782, a meeting took place at the Shawnee villages near the headwaters of the Mad River in the Ohio country, with Shawnees, Delawares, Mingos, Wyandots, Miamis, Ottawas, Ojibwas, and Potawatomis in attendance. As a result, 150 British Rangers under Captain William Caldwell and some 1,100 Indian warriors supervised by Pennsylvania Loyalists Alexander McKee, Simon Girty, and Matthew Elliott, set out to attack Wheeling, on the upper Ohio River. This was one of the largest forces sent against rebel American settlements during the war. The expedition was called off, however, when scouts reported that a rebel leader, George Rogers Clark, whom the Indians feared more than any other rebel commander, was about to invade the Ohio country from Kentucky. Caldwell's American army returned to the Mad River to oppose the invasion, but the attack never came. In fact, Clark did have a large armed boat patrolling the Ohio River, but he had no plans to invade. Most of the Indian warriors returned to their homes. Bryan stationed Caldwell and about 50 Loyalists, supported by 300 Indians, crossed the Ohio River into Kentucky. They meant to surprise and destroy the settlement of Bryan Station, but the rebel settlers discovered them and took shelter within their stockade. Caldwell and McKee's force laid siege to Bryan Station on August 15, 1782, killing all of the rebel settlers' livestock and destroying their crops, but withdrew after 2 days when they learned that a rebel unit of Kentucky militiamen were on the way. Caldwell had lost 5 Indians killed and 2 wounded during his short siege. The rebel militia arrived at Bryan Station on August 18. The force included about 47 men from Fayette County and another 135 from Lincoln County. The highest-ranking officer, Colonel John Todd of Fayette County, was in overall command. Assisting him were 2 lieutenant colonels, Stephen Trigg of Lincoln County and Daniel Boone of Fayette County. Benjamin Logan, colonel of the Lincoln militia, was gathering men and had not yet arrived. The rebel militiamen could either pursue the Loyalists immediately, to keep them from escaping, or they could more safely wait for rebel leader Colonel Logan to arrive with reinforcements. Daniel Boone wanted to wait for rebel leader Logan and his troops to arrive. Logan was only a day away, but Major Hugh McGarry urged Boone to chase after the Indians. McGarry convinced others that they would be cowards if they did not follow the native Indians and Loyalists. Boone was forced to go after them. The enemy rebel Kentuckians decided to pursue the Loyalist and natives, who had a 40-mile lead on them. They set out on horseback over an old buffalo trail before making camp at sunset. Battle. On the morning of August 19, the rebels reached the Licking River, near a spring and salt lick known as the Lower Blue Licks. A few Indian scouts were seen watching them from across the river. Behind the scouts was a hill around which the river looped. Rebel Commander Todd called a council and asked Daniel Boone, the most experienced woodsman, what he thought. Boone said he had been growing increasingly suspicious because of the obvious trail the Indians left. He felt the Indians were trying to lead them into an ambush. Hugh McGarry, eager to prove he was no coward, urged an immediate attack. When no one listened, he mounted his horse and rode across the ford. He yelled out, "Them that ain't cowards, follow me." The men immediately followed McGarry, as did the officers, who hoped to restore order. Boone remarked, "We are all slaughtered men," and crossed the river. Most of the men dismounted and formed a line of battle several rows deep. They advanced up the hill, rebels Todd and McGarry in the center, a rebel Trigg on the right, Boone on the left. As Boone had suspected, Caldwell's force was waiting on the other side, concealed in ravines. When the rebels reached the summit, the Indians opened fire at close range with devastating accuracy. After only 5 minutes, the center and right of the rebel line fell back. Only Boone's men on the left managed to push forward. Rebel leaders Todd and Trigg, easy targets on horseback, were shot dead. The rebels began to flee down the hill, fighting hand-to-hand with other Indians who had flanked them. McGarry rode up to Boone's company and told him everyone was retreating and that Boone was now surrounded. Boone ordered his men to retreat. He grabbed a riderless horse and ordered his 23-year-old son, Israel Boone, to mount it. He then turned to look for a horse for himself. Israel suddenly fell to the ground, shot through the neck. Boone realized his son was dead, mounted the horse and joined in the retreat. Aftermath. Although he had not taken part in the battle, George Rogers Clark, as senior rebel commander, was widely condemned in Kentucky for allowing the American Loyalist and Native American force to cross the river and inflict the Blue Licks disaster. In response, Clark launched a retaliatory raid across the Ohio River in November 1782. His force consisted of more than 1,000 men, including Benjamin Logan and Daniel Boone. The Kentuckians destroyed 5 unoccupied Shawnee villages on the Great Miami River in the last major offensive of the American Revolution. No battles took place, since the Shawnees refused to stand and fell back to their villages on the Mad River. 4 years later, the Indian villages on the Mad River would be destroyed by Benjamin Logan at the outset of the Northwest Indian War. Hugh McGarry confronted the Shawnee chief Molintha and asked if he had been at Blue Licks. In fact, the Shawnees had not taken part, the Indians being Wyandots. Molintha nodded his head in agreement. McGarry killed him with a tomahawk. Molintha had voluntarily and peacefully surrendered, waving an American flag and a copy of the peace treaty he had signed earlier that year, in the belief that these would protect him. Colonel Logan immediately relieved McGarry of his command and ordered him court-martialed for killing a prisoner. McGarry was stripped of his commission for a year, but was otherwise unpunished. Legacy. The Blue Licks battle site is commemorated at Blue Licks Battlefield State Park, on U.S. Route 68 between Paris and Maysville, just outside the town of Blue Licks Springs. The site includes a granite obelisk, burial grounds, and a museum. Every August, on the weekend closest to the 19th, a reenactment and memorial service is held.